Hi folks, I'm International Master John Watson, and this is Ask the Master on ICC TV. The main idea of this show is for you guys listening to ask questions about chess and the chess world, or you can ask questions in advance about chess and the chess world, and I'll answer them on this show. And the best way to ask questions in advance is to send to askimwatson@chessclub.com. That's an email, ASKIM. WATSON @chessclub.com. So ask imwatson@chessclub.com. You can also send a message to me on my handle, and a couple of people have done this recently. My ICC handle, John L. Watson. This is an ICC show, and so you don't have to be an ICC member to watch, and it's free, and all the shows are archived on YouTube. But if you are an ICC member, you can have access to earlier lectures that I've made, along with many, many other Grandmaster lectures and lessons, and of course you can play. So you might want to look into the ICC. The alternative is to ask questions right now, live on the chat. I see there's a bunch of people up there already. Alan and Steiner. Steiner, I got your game. I don't know if we'll get to it today, but I definitely am ready to do it, either today or next week, probably next week. Hi, Jonathan. And we're definitely going to get to yours because we've waited on that one. What do we have here? Maybe I'll start with the chat briefly, but I have a lot of stuff that I've been behind on. So let's just see if we can get through some of this fairly quickly. Here's Ellen asking about, let me see, let me get an empty board up here. Whoops. I had one set up here. Well, actually, maybe it'd be easier to answer this first as long as it's already set up. I got a question, sort of a general question. It goes as follows. Watching your March 7th discussion on what choice of rook to play when there are multiple options reminded me of GM Larry Evans' generalization from his book New Ideas in Chess. In the position below, that's the one in front of you, after rook fd1, he opines, this move follows certain sound, although never before formulated rules. When either of the two rooks can move to the necessary central file, there are these criteria to be applied. Select the rook which is doing the least, and select the rook after which it arrives there will permit the remaining rook its greatest possible mobility. So in this position, he talks about playing rook fd1, that move, and the idea would be that if you played rook ad1, it would violate that principle because it wouldn't leave this one with maximum mobility. So neither rook is doing, I don't think either rook is doing more, so the principle about doing the least is not relevant here. Okay, so he says this was from the Log Cabin Chess Club Championship. And I didn't want to say too much about this, I just thought I'd show it to you because I thought it was interesting for people who want to know about rooks. Another point about moving this rook is that it doesn't support the most natural thing to do. In other words, one reason you might be moving this is you might think, well, the other one goes on the open file. And indeed it might, but it's even more likely in a position like this that this rook's probably going to end up going to, let's just make a move for black, a nonsense move, that this rook is going to end up going to that file to support a minority attack. And in fact, that's one possibility, is that this rook could have come here to begin with. And then this rook here, and then an advance, which shows that it's hard to make a rule about these kinds of positions. It's really unclear which rooks go where, even if you have a little rule like that. Very often, neither rook will go to an open file, for example, even though an open file theoretically maximizes mobility. And you might say, well, that's not real mobility because it's blocked off, but it really is mobility because these are movable pieces, and these two are at least not immediately movable, or they aren't going to open up. So it's a good question, but I think it's very hard to generalize about in general about the rook problem. Let me just do something really quickly here. Maybe just get up a board here. Let me get rid of this. Okay. And I was thinking about how many times rooks just go to places that they're convenient. Just for example, a few places rooks can go to. Sometimes you want to do a rook prophylactic move to prevent your opponent from having, say, a pawn break or something. Sometimes you want to defend a weakness, like in the Sicilian or the King's Indian, you might want to defend a weakness on d6 on an open file. You know how often those happen. So you really might avoid putting it on open files. Even if there's a couple open files, you might put it on the closed file just because it serves a better purpose there. You may also want to put rooks behind pawns to make advances on either the flank or the center. You might, rather than putting them on open files, you might want them on closed files, but ones where pawns can do a break. And I was thinking of a lot of examples of this, and just now, I didn't have a lot of time to think about it, but for example, he's talking about the Queen's Gambit, and I was thinking, well, in the Queen's Gambit, almost every Queen's Gambit, there's lines where you play to closed files. I mean, look at main lines like the Tartakower or something like that, where white might play. Here's for example a typical line, and you go, okay, you've got this open file on the C file, so that looks good. But and let's just have black make some typical moves, like say that move maybe, and say white plays here. He could play b4, play for b4. Well, there's an example. Sometimes the rooks are going to be best after this move b4. The rooks are going to be best over on the queen side. But let me just show you something like this. Let's say black plays here, for example. Often it's very good for white to set up rooks. Instead of setting up rooks here and here, for example, just put the rooks behind the pawns that are onto closed files. Because for one thing, that prevents or discourages the move c5 because you can take it, and then you can attack d5 and maybe even win d5. And the other rook might go, for example, to e1, which looks kind of silly, but after a few moves, you might find out that you're suddenly, so you're suddenly playing something like e4, takes bishop here, and guess what? This rook is where it wants to be. And black can't take this because of check, winning the rook because this rook is here. So that kind of thing. An example where you put two rooks on closed files. It really is very position dependent. If you look at, what else was I thinking of? Well, there's countless examples. I'm a French player, so there's all kinds of times when you put rooks on b8s and g8s, and I mean even the exchange French or something, right? Here's that open file. Is this a good example? Let me think of an example. Let me just talk about something like a position like this, for example. Something like this and this and this and this. And these are just sort of standard kind of moves. And in a position like this, what you'll often get is, sometimes he goes here, for example. What you'll often get is black playing, instead of putting a rook on the open file, white put his rook on the open file. Often he doesn't, by the way. Often that's a waste of a move. But often a good move for black will be that move a lot of times, because what black wants to do is just go like that, maybe take this or move away, and just blast all your pawns at them. So the two pawns go on the edge, be on closed files. So the two rooks do. So it's hard to make generalities about where rooks go, and it's always a very difficult decision what to do, and often you'll regret it later. In Sicilian defenses, for example, how many open Sicilians does black, for example, or either side, but especially black, I would think, go put rooks on in the center, like a Scheveningen or something. You'll get, let me just make some moves. Get something like, and white's playing like this, and black's getting pieces out, and eventually black puts a rook on, I'm gonna kind of mess this up, but puts one rook on e8, and partly to make room for his pieces, partly because he wants to make the move e5 a lot of times, or else d5 followed by e5, partly because when white plays a move like f5, he wants to have this square better defended in a position like that. So often that rook will go there, and maybe the other rook will go to, let's have white make a move or something. I'm being kind of silly here. Often black will have the other rook go to d8, for example, or even sometimes b8 to support b5. So it's just the choice of where to put your rooks is just extremely complicated and strange, and I think the Evans rule is really cool and it's really nice to have, but I don't think it's something you could follow or get too much use out of. It's more like an intellectually interesting thing to say, which is even possibly true most of the time, but I'm not sure if it helps you make a decision. Interesting to think about these kinds of issues. Okay, let me go to the chat really fast, and I'll take a look at Alan's first question. He's talking about a Grunfeld defense. Let's take a look at this. And that's the Grunfeld. And we're getting an exchange Grunfeld, so we're getting the big center against black's piece play and chipping away at the center. Assume bishop g7. Well, c5 first. Let me just see. He wants to play c5. Well, is white lost a move here? You've got bc3 and, oh, bishop c4. Okay. Small b, so it confused me. Okay, bishop g7, knight e2, knight c6, castles. These are all standard moves, folks. These are all theoretical moves, been played in thousands of master games. Knight a5 is often not played yet. It's too early. I'm sorry, is black castled? Of course black's castled. There's something wrong here. Which line are we talking about for white? Probably bishop e3. Oh yeah, you've got to defend the d pawn. Sorry about that. Okay, so now knight a5. This is a book position, and knight a5 isn't that common immediately. And then c4. Now someone on ICC rubbished the line, but I found a game between Smyslov and Geller played in the 1950s where exactly the same strategy was implemented by Smyslov. The game was very similar as in the second volume of My Great Predecessors. Not only that, but Kasparov complements the idea as being difficult to play against. The game is 91. Okay, so I will look that up for next week, that game. I'll look up the game and Kasparov's comment. Yeah, my initial idea is that this releases pressure on the center too quickly. One thing you mentioned, for example, is white already has f4 in, so maybe that's a little bit weak, although then this knight is even further away from the action and can't go to f6, for example. Yeah, I'm very suspicious of this idea. I don't really like it for black. I think it's probably those lines were similar, but not similar enough. Because here, black has no pressure and white can play for attack at will. What's black's plan? How is black going to attack here? So I'm a little bit suspicious of this. And one of the things is, if this, okay, I agree. If this pawn was on, let's make black have a move here. I don't even know what he's doing actually, but maybe here to put pressure there. If white had a pawn here and black had just a little bit of extra time, and let me just give him some time, maybe to play a move like this. I'm going to have white make stupid moves, and that maybe that would be a nice little counterattacking idea to put pressure here, something like that. But you're probably not going to get that, and white hasn't committed to f4 anyway, as you pointed out. So that's another problem. So for example. Whoops, sorry. B6, let's say white, does nothing, and black plays here. White can also play something like f3, just very smoothly. And most people would say white's probably a little better in a position like this. I actually think f4 is a good move because I don't think black can get f5 in. I don't think black can attack the e-pawn before white gets an attack going. For example, here already we're at the point where you could play f5. A very nice attack, probably queen d2 first. And it's just a little too late for black to get organized here. I think this is just too early. You probably want some other concession first before you play knight a5 and c4. But I will definitely look up those games and we can talk about those strategies. Fascinating thing, if you're a Grunfeld player or if you play white against the Grunfeld, I think it'd be fun to discuss the ideas in these positions. So that's a good question. Hoping we'll finish knight e7, definitely. That's on my schedule as being the second or third thing to do. Any tips how to get better with calculation? We've talked about this before. I think I'm going to skip that for a second because I've got so much to go through. We have talked about that several times. I don't have any really strong recommendations, but I do have my usual standard 3 or 4 things to try for training. Saw a French like St. George that went blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's take a quick look at that. It's so much more fun to do chat than my prepared things just because they're spontaneous and you can really have some fun. Okay, a6, d4, e6. That is a better order, by the way. There was a master kid that played against me and played this order and talked about how he played it a ton in actual chess. c4, and he plays d5. Okay, that's very French-like, as you said. If white wants to avoid this, he can play something like this first, and then he's not committed to c4. So d5 looks pretty unimpressive. So, but anyway, okay, so c4, now d5. And he had ideas against every move order, and we talked about it for a while. But a strong player and rising player. And I actually beat him in a game with this, but that had nothing to do with the opening. Okay, so knight c3 was played. I suppose critical might be just simply, well, that's a tough one. I guess I think knight c3 is a pretty logical move here. You could think about this. I guess the idea would be that you're scared of b5 and bishop b7. But if nothing else, you know, something like this might be a little better for white, maybe. Now you really got me wondering. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's best here. c4 was a funny move. But anyway, let's just see it. What happened was knight c3, d takes e4. Now you could look at a move like this, I suppose. Might be a very interesting move. Pinning this and renew the threat. See how white's going to respond in the center. So here he took it. That seems cooperative. On the other hand, we're now back in a pretty normal position where a6 is a useful move. So I'm starting to think that maybe this is okay. Bishop b4 check, knight c3, and black won. Yeah, bishop b4 check. Okay, one thing you have to think about is the sort of semi-Slav gambit that goes like this. Whether this is reasonable to play. And you could play bishop e2 or knight e2. Interesting position. I'm not sure. Probably bishop e2 because that looks awfully risky to play this kind of position. The one difference is white doesn't have the move queen d6. The pawn's not on c6. Yeah, actually knight c6 is going to gain a tempo, so I take that back. This is probably fine. So maybe knight c3 is forced or best. Well, you have to take a close look at this and make sure what's going on because I've never seen this before. But okay, so knight c3 and it says and black won. Well, I'd say white's still, this is equal probably. This is roughly equal. It's just a game. The bishop b4 doesn't really go that well with the a6. On the other hand, white's wasted a bunch of time. So the black's ahead in development. So it's just a game. It's just a game. Looks okay for black to me. I was going to say that a more normal idea after this is that black is going to play some move like b6 or maybe even a knight f6 idea. You know, like bishop e7, knight f3, knight f6, something like this. And then it's like that Morozevich line where you play like this and attack in the center. I think black's probably okay here. I'm not thrilled with c5 and knight c3. I don't really like the idea of taking and playing e5 because it frees this bishop. But on the other hand, maybe white might be able to argue he's slightly better here because that move was so slow. You know, just knight c3, bishop d3, knight f3. Anyway, interesting, very interesting. So how about a French order? We talked about a6 quite a few times. We keep getting asked the same question, but that's okay. Maybe I'll talk about it next week again. Play c4 and aim for the f6 break. The question is, oh, for black. In which line? Sorry. Yeah, I don't know unless you mean c5. Steiner, I don't know which one you're talking about. Are you talking about in this French line? I play f5 very quickly. That's in, it's in which line? Oh, okay, in that Grunfeld line. I just don't think you're going to get time for f5 because white's going to bowl you over in the center before f5 is effective. But you're right, if you could get f5 in, that'd be great. I just don't think you'll ever get it in without other problems. Loosening your center too much, you'll get killed on the e file. But we'll try it. We can look at it. Okay, so let me do some of the stuff that people have been asking me about for weeks here, and I never seem to get to. Okay, Jonathan, we have a game. Let's just do that. Let's do your game, and we have two games. Actually, I like the. I think I like the second one you sent me even better, but we can't get through two this week, so we'll do the other one next week. You said in this one you're asking mainly about the opening. They both ended up being queen's gambits of some sort, didn't they? Yeah, this one was a Catalan. Yeah, I will definitely get to that other one too because I really like it. I think it's a cool example. Okay, so white, this is called the Catalan for white. And normally black is going to either attack this way or simply develop. And if white plays c4 at some point, what black will often do one of two things. He'll either kind of curl up, play a system like that, or he'll take, and that's sort of the main line is this capture. And white has all kinds of options, and you look at the games of all the top grandmasters. Kramnik sort of brought this back with a vengeance, but everyone plays it pretty much. Okay, in this game he plays a very odd move, knight c6. I don't think it's that bad, just because it gets a piece out, and the Catalan is not that aggressive, so you're usually not going to be able to blunder against it. But it does block off this pawn attack on the center, and that's considered a little odd. It's usually considered a little early to put a knight there. It's probably not the absolute best idea, especially if white hasn't played c4 yet. Because if white had played c4, black could take that, and then there's a little extra pressure in the center, and that can be fairly effective as long as the queen's on that pawn too. And then you can maybe break with e5 later. So the knight on c6 would make more sense if white had a pawn on c4 already. Okay, so black plays there. That's because black's lacking a plan now without the c5 break. So black switches plans and plays for an e5 break, which makes a lot of sense. Because you need something. You need to. Otherwise, your bishop's just a bad bishop, and you're sort of got less space, and you're sort of stuck in the center. And the funny thing is that now I think white might play. White played b3. This is very logical, trying to stop e5 and get a piece out. I think at this point, since that's not necessarily that good in my opinion, and since black's about to play e5, I think the other possible moves are, well, one of them is this, a little abstract, but those doubled pawns are actually considered pretty good for white. They're okay because they restrain the center. But I think the more obvious thing to do is play here. And I said, well, I just said that the knight was partly justified if white's played c4, but here's the difference. Black's already committed his bishop to the wrong square for this position. So for example, something like this, you could simply play maybe knight here, and this bishop should be back here so that you can take this pawn, but you can't. And the bishop should be back there anyway, so you can get more pressure in the center. So this position, for example, if you made a move like that, you'd have either knight takes immediately or even just take everything off. I think taking everything off would be just fine. A position like this, attacking here, and now black's in some trouble here. Well, actually he's in a lot of trouble. I think I messed up because this just didn't work, did it? This guy's hanging, and there's no good place to put it. And in the meantime, we have that pressure, and this is not good. But that was hard to avoid. I think black would have had to, I don't know what, maybe castle first. And then white has this nice choice between playing e4 or even just taking, maybe forcing the bishop back. And now white could play maybe this move, for example, threatening knight takes. And now look at a position like this. That's why this is an interesting game in a lot of ways, is you see some standard positions. This is a great standard position with white having the long diagonal unobstructed. There's moves like bishop f4 and rook c1, pressure down an open file. What does black have in return for this? Well, he has a bad bishop and not much chance of getting it out because he can't play b6 and he can't play e5. e5 is a long, long ways away. So that's a bad sign for black. And white also has just smooth development. This bishop can go to one of these squares and rook c1. And white also has the central majority, so e4 is going to be a big move too. So this is quite a serious advantage for white. And shows why bishop e6 might not have been, the whole knight c6 bishop d6 idea is well met by c4, in my opinion. The way white played it, I think black could have maybe just played e5 here. It's probably okay. If here, you could even just defend this. And anytime you play here, you're giving up the center, so you're probably not going to be extremely happy here. There's no way to win any pawns, and black's got nice, open, easy play here. Also, you have to watch out a little bit for e4. e4 might have been a good move, too. Same thing if you take it here. Same problems. I don't think you can claim an advantage here. I think, it's equal. White's equal because he moved first and he's got, fairly active pieces, but I don't think there's any advantage there. As the game went, this is very nice. You really managed to clamp down on e5. So now white, I think, is doing well again. Black played there thinking about e5, and now I think just knight e5 is a good move. You can't even take it this way because of the fork. And how are you ever going to get e5 in? If you take this way, you've given up your best bishop, not your bad bishop. And you've given white a bishop pair in a position where black doesn't even have an outpost. He's not ahead in space. He doesn't have development. Remember, those are our rules. If you're going to take two knights against two bishops, you want to have outpost, space, attack, something very concrete. So black would have to just sit there and make moves, and that's not a good sign. White can just reinforce his knight there, or he can break in the center. That's probably even better. Play knight here and rook over and e4 would be a good plan. White's considerably better there. Um, so instead, though, white played that move, and now black played another slow move. I would still play knight e5. White plays c4, and that's a pretty good idea for black just to try and get a little bit of space. He's getting all cramped. c5 was a threat to win a piece, but white's much better. Excellent move here by Jonathan. The queen isn't doing much. The queen's having a hard time finding a good piece, and you don't want to lose too much time. You might not want to bring that queen into play against your queen side. So he simply shuttles over and gives the queen a good square with gain of time. It's like developing with gain of time and stopping e5, so that's a great position for white. The bishop is still bad, at least it gets out, but it's still bad. White plays for the open file. White's simply better here. Space, pressure on the center, better bishop. So very well played. Now again, there's this e5 problem, so you just play knight e5. It's just a great move. This time you can't even take it because the knight's lost, right? Or it can go there, but then he'd lose a pawn, and if it goes here, it gets trapped. Oop, sorry, it doesn't quite get trapped. Looks like a horrible, horrible position, though. Maybe just bishop f3, or e3, whoops, or e3 threatening g4. Anyway, nobody wants to play this for black, so you can't even take that, and this is a beautiful knight here. I'd say anything to stop any e5 idea. Of course, what you played is fine. Oh, by the way, there's a mystery. Here, look where the rooks went. They went to these two squares. They could have gone to any number of squares. The rook's sort of more natural here, but there's an idea of e4 here, which I really like. And black doesn't do anything about white's threat. So now e4 is a good move, just good, consistent move, nice space advantage. But what you did is also excellent. Just played very simply with knight e5 and a4. E3. That's probably a very good move, good solid move. B4 has the problem, well, that this is hanging in some lines, probably just A3 followed by taking. It's too not worth it. And now black makes a very strange move, releasing the pressure. Probably not the best move. White goes here. Technically speaking, this is better. I don't like to make too many technical points, but it's a technical opening. The Catalan is a technical opening, and that helps support that square and stop knight here. For example, if black plays like he did during the game, which was this move, then let me just see how I'm going to do that. Thought I had some reason to think this was good. This was the way the game was played, this move. Oh yeah, and now this move is not good because after capturing and here, black can't retreat this bishop because there's two pieces on that knight. And in the game, what happened, I'll show you, was the exact same idea, but black was able to get away with that move because after capturing here and going here, black can simply move the knight back. And this knight is not hanging. It's only attacked once. So in the game, actually white took that first and then took it. And now black was able to just retreat. And now maybe it's only about equal. Maybe white's better, but it's not very impressive anymore. What are white's advantages? Not so clear. At least he has an open file. But nothing that great is happening. I like that move. That's a good move. Get rid of that knight. And now this is a weird position, but that's the first mistake of the game for either side, really, a major mistake, in my opinion, because it gives away this square. And if this outpost was shielding these weak squares, these are two weak squares here, then that'd be okay, but f6 is going to kick that knight away anyway. And then you've got direct pressure and an outpost on an open file. What does white have in return for that? It's not so clear. What you could have done instead of that is just maybe expand in the center, or make any kind of natural move like this, sort of attacking on the queen side, and worry about making this move later maybe. So this is the first move that probably wasn't very good, and that's really almost the end of the opening. And since you were mostly interested in the opening, well, maybe I'll go a little faster through the rest of this. Black defended the center. That was a good idea. Queen b1's a good move, a little bit late. And yeah, see, the bishop got out. Remember, that's his bad bishop. So everything sort of went wrong there. It'd be nice if, with the bishop there, if your pawn was here, so you could block it off with the pawn there. But now you can't do anything about this outpost. So black's actually better here because he controls that outpost. And I thought both sides played very well in this game. By the way, that was a terrible move for Black. Black should, maybe that's almost as big. White's actually doing okay here, but that's because that queen maneuver was really bad. The good thing is B5's real pretty much almost forced to get everything out, and that leaves a big weakness there and a big outpost here. So now things are about even because there's a big outpost there and light square weaknesses, and really it's kind of a trade-off at this point. I really like this rook a7 move. I'll show you why in a second, because he wants to double anyway. He wants to play rook e8, and he's going to play rook ae7 too. So it's a fairly even game, but Black's making progress in the center. There go more light square. That's a good move. Bishop, knight, queen f5. It had a threat, but it also owns those light squares. So White has the dark squares over here, but White has light squares, and it's near the king. So maybe Black's a slight bit better. White, by the way, White's last move is actually pretty decent. There was some pressure going on here, so he, instead of just defending, the knight, keeping the knight defended, he gives up this pawn temporarily, but gets back that pawn. So White's just playing for equality now, but that's okay. At this point, yeah, now at this point, that's too slow a move. Should just play there, and then very soon, for example, if a move like that, you just go here and get rid of the queens. And if anything, White's better now, so maybe rook a7 wasn't a good move. Why is White better? Because the queens have to go off. And what that means is you have an active rook that attacks, there are three potential targets here. There's a lot of weaknesses over there. There's only one target here, and it's on the third rank. Third rank weaknesses are easier to protect than more advanced pawns. That's something worth remembering. Advanced pawns are harder to protect in general, where weaknesses, especially if they're weaknesses. And the pawn on e3 is not much of a weakness, is it? Because it can't be attacked. So really, Black shouldn't have played rook a7. Black should have just played something simple like queen coming back or something of that nature. But this time he gets a tempo with rook e7, and then he gets it before queen c2 can be played. Black runs away and manages to penetrate with the queen. And I don't think I'll go too much further because the king was exposed now. Actually, that's not quite what happened, sorry. Oh yeah, White went to win this, but he lost the file. So I think that's the relevant part of this game. White played fine, managed to get, I think, equality, but then had positional problems. And I won't go into that. But a really fascinating game. And the biggest thing about that game was that, well, both sides played very well, and White got that nice bind on the queen side. But in the opening, it was a little better for White until this horrible thing happened. And this is maybe the only positional thing to think about. Now, remember, there's a clock ticking, and you have to make these decisions quickly. So I might very well have played f4 myself. I'm not trying to be too judgmental, but it is positionally a very bad move unless you can somehow justify the position of the knight or get a counterattack. And here you really can't because he ends up chasing it away, which is something maybe you didn't realize during the game. So that's one of the major things. Let me keep going. Caro-Kann theory. Yeah, I got a lot of general questions like this. Just your, no, I've had to take up the King's Indian. Okay, so let me look at the next thing because there were the questions about last week. Oh, the 97 in the 97 in the Bononi, or what seems like a Bononi. So let's do that. A fascinating question because it has so many great positional lessons in it. Also, it might be a decent weapon to play because most people are not going to play the right way against it. And even if they do, it's a game. So the question is, so I'm showing a game that leads to what the question was. The question was, what about this move knight e7, okay? And what I said last week was that if Black is allowed to just play normally, something like this, and we'll look at this, we'll see a game with this, or we'll see an excerpt with this, then maybe he's okay. Gets the long diagonal like in a Bononi. This knight covers nice squares on the king's side. And Black can castle and play rook e8 and et cetera, et cetera. Now maybe we'll see that later, but anyway. But what I recommended is something that's been played by a few people. It hasn't been played by that many people, but they've all won, and they've been strong players. Is this move, and it's a very simple idea. If he starts playing there, you're going to attack it again and force it to a bad square in the center. Maybe I'll show you an example of that, but makes knight g6 look pretty bad. And so in this game, he played h5. These are strong players, strong grandmasters, actually. And White played e4. Well, actually not. The second one was maybe an international master. Now this is very interesting. Stoll annotates this game, and he gives this move as an exclamation point. And maybe I kind of agree with him because you really don't want to play f6 and make even more, make that these squares all kind of vulnerable. But after a while, you probably can't avoid it. He has black playing here, and now e4, and a6 trying to get b5 in, a4 stopping it, all typical Bononi themes. And a good example here is white. I just put this in myself. White could attack this. And if black has to, and you can't play f6 because if bishop takes check, or at least it's going to be extremely risky, or you're going to be exposing yourself to that move. So the more natural move is g6, and just knight f3 now, because you have, and bishop g7 looks natural. It looks like black's getting his pieces out sort of okay, but now this pawn is kind of weak. If the knight were here, like in a regular Bononi, it'd be easy to defend that with queen e7. And that's another way to try and defend it, a simple way to try and defend it. But the problem there is this move is a real issue. Because if black play, okay, if black plays here, then there's an attack on b7 and there's attack on d6. And if black plays here, you simply take on d6. And if black plays queen d7, you have either winning the exchange with bishop there because takes, or maybe even simpler would be to play something like bishop takes d6, I'm thinking. Is that right? Can you go here? Actually, that looks risky. I'm not so sure about that. That's kind of difficult. You could just take it and force him to take with the king. That's got to be pretty bad because e5 is coming. Also, knight a4 is a threat. So I didn't finish analyzing this, but I just like white. How about that? Space, good pieces, king stuck in the center, e5 is a threat. Knight g5 might be an idea. And knight a4, b6, that's an idea. So I'd be very scared of this position. Anyway, going back, in this game, white did play bishop g5, but at least black got b5 in, or at least has a chance to play b5 later. Knight here, knight up, f6. Okay, he's forced to play that, but he's got enough control over the central squares that maybe that's sort of okay. And he's got the expansion. White probably should have stopped that with a4 because now black has something to play for. Sure, his kingside's sort of messy, but look at his nice queenside attack. And he's going to play the usual Bononi ideas anyway. And you'll see the point here for black. I wanted to show you a game that black did well. Now I think white still stands pretty well. He can play like that. But black has some chances too, and you'll see what those are. Black's chances are based on this move f5, and which is what he talked about last week, just breaking up the center and getting a square for that knight to move into the center of the board. And that's what he does in this game. Now white's still doing fine here, but at least black gets that f5 move in, which opens up the bishop, but almost more importantly, breaks up that pawn so that this knight has a square. You know, that knight's been a problem in all these lines. The knight doesn't have a future. It doesn't have anywhere to go. That's the issue here, since it didn't get to g6. But now it does. Now it's got a place to go. We're going to clear out that square. Now, of course, white still has space and is doing well. But one thing I wanted to mention is that a move like this now, which looks so good, attacking that weak square, now that square's covered, and f4 is threatened, and black has plenty of play. And one of the lessons of something like this is you can usually afford 1/3 rank weakness, even the e6 square, as long as you have space and active pieces. One weakness usually doesn't kill you. 2 or 3 weaknesses will kill you. But one weakness, even a very serious one like e6, is not the end of the world. Is kind of one of the morals of this game. So white plays there, which is, I think, a better move. It's a nice move. Just stopping f4 from winning a piece, but also using that g5 square, because you can always maybe take later and play knight g5 later. Okay, so black takes it. Why is he taking it? Because he wants to block off that bishop and maybe get some simplification in. And I'll just show you some moves. Okay, so a lot of pieces come off, and okay, and black voluntarily gives up this square, again, as I say, because he's got other things going on. He has an outpost, he has open files, and it's just one weakness. So let me show you how that goes. White goes ahead and takes that beautiful square. Is that good enough to get an advantage? Maybe not. Look at this position for a second. Black can challenge that knight with either knight d4 or knight g7, and he can also do what he does in the game. And let me show you that. Oh, by the way, h4 was hanging, so that's another tempo. And what he does in the game is he just doubles. on the file. I think he does it in an odd order. He attacks the knight first, and that's fine, but maybe rook over doubling first would have been even better to get more control of the e-file. White retreats, that's a good move, otherwise he's just giving up open files. But now black's coming back to that square. So white tries to challenge the file, and you'll see that black's already probably better here, or at least it's difficult for white to play. So he finds a good move. Rather than giving up this file, he sneaks into that square and reestablishes his knight on e6, which, by the way, at least somewhat discourages that knight d4 move. And black kind of bails out here, but it's not a total bailout, because if white takes that, this is a very dangerous pawn. And that one's probably going to fall at some point. And so that's a risky thing to do. So white plays a funny move, plays that move in the center, and it's just too risky, because black ends up taking this with two passed pawns. Now white's got an idea to attack, but it's just not quite good enough. So what he should have done was just retreat. And probably here, just to stop this knight from moving again, so he can be on this square, would have been the best move. And maybe black's a little better, but it's no big deal. Instead, he sacrificed a pawn, but unfortunately that's a very important pawn, because those are passed pawns now, in order to get a counterattack. And that looks pretty good at first sight, because the knight is supporting an attack on the if this knight has to move, you kind of think, oh gee, there might be mates on these kinds of squares. But it just turns out that in this position there's nothing much to do for white. There's no way to really break through. He tried that move. The problem is if he takes here, which maybe was the original intention, to attack here, attacking this way, maybe even thinking about getting the queen in on these squares. Black has a very nice move, which is just here, and white, whoops, and white can pretty much resign, because knight here, check, is threatened. This is just an overwhelming position. F3 allows mate. So white can't do that, so white changes his mind, which makes you think that he didn't quite see it all clearly to begin with. And black just sneaks out, check, and then comes back, defending everything. And now black's a pawn ahead with very good pieces. And, oh, well, mainly with these pawns, excuse me, that's the main problem. So black tries to get queens off because the pawns are going to roll. I don't know if we have to show too much else. There's a little bit of repetition. There's probably time trouble here. And he starts pushing it. Pretty soon, black starts pushing his pawns. In fact, I think, oddly enough, I think he gave up here. Oh yeah, because he just won another pawn. The point is that if white plays here, black goes here, and gets his piece back, and then these pawns just win by themselves pretty much. So kind of a cool game. It sort of shows you what black's after with knight e7, getting that f5 move in, and establishing some advantage. Now let me show you what I think white, trying to establish some advantage. So let me show you what I think white, an example of a good game by white. This is by Grandmaster Luc von Viely, but versus Robert Zelchich, who's a very strong player, 2,500 player. So it's kind of a good example, I think. Very positionally interesting, because these ideas all come up in other more mainstream openings. So even if you don't play this opening, it shows you what kind of things can happen. By the way, the main advantage of this opening for black is surprise value. I wanted to show you something else too, though. I think this is very interesting. It's sort of similar. I think that move might be a way to play it if you want to surprise people and still get a pretty good game. Let me show you this example. Now this time white's smart and stops b5. You should stop b5. And you'll see in a second why I'm showing you this. Now black plays here to get on the long diagonal. So it's like a Bononi, but without the weaknesses. And the other idea is, if I play knight here and knight here, now you can't play h4. You can't play h4, h5, which is what was kind of embarrassing black before. So let me just show you that. Here, knight e7. This is kind of a cool way to play. You know, maybe white's better, but I'm not even sure. Another example was h3, knight g6. Yeah, I think I won't show you this for reasons of time. I think I'll just show you the game I was going to. Let me do that. Knight here is a better move than h3 anyway. And knight here. Now look what black's doing. He's managed to fin shadow his bishop without creating any weaknesses over there, and he's got that knight on that square we like so much. Of course, it's taken him some time. He's behind in development, but he still has an open file to work with. And I think black's okay here. It's a reasonable game. I don't think black's better, but I think black's got a perfectly good playable game. Black plays b6. Now one idea of b6 It's not just to, well, it makes that move a little less effective, but it also has this nice idea about bringing a rook over into the center, which is a standard Bononi theme that I think is worth remembering. First he gets this rook out, and then white plays here. White's thinking about b4. That's a very useful move, and it's good. b6 is a good move to have in against it. You're probably going to play that move anyway. Okay, black doesn't play the rook up and over maneuver, but he gets a pretty decent game anyway. Now here he plays knight d7 just to emphasize control of that square. Now he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces on e5. He's got 6 pieces either directly or indirectly defending e5, and that's what the Bononi's a lot about, is simply stopping white from advancing his majority. Remember, white has a 4 against 3 majority. See that? So what white really wants to do is advance those pawns. Well, it's going to be awfully hard to get e5 in against 6 pieces. So that's one of the kind of philosophies behind what's going on here. And so what white plays is b3, rook b8. One of the reasons the queen's here is to stop b4 from being effective, by the way. And white plays f4, which is the standard idea, but the standard idea has to do with trying to get these moves in somehow, and maybe they aren't so realistic here. Knight df8. That's just to get that bishop free. I'm not sure if it's such a great move. Both sides are having trouble finding a really good plan. Bishop here, just a little harassment over there. Knight f5, and he doesn't take that. He just goes back, and white comes this way. Anyway, it's considered. Was considered by the annotator to be about even. I can believe that. This is Novikov Moilders, 2 GMs, or 2 very strong players, and thought it was an interesting example. Now in this game, Von Wheelie, knight e7 is played immediately, instead of bishop e7, and white plays this h4 move. Now another move you can play is just g3, which supports the h4 move. That's another interesting move that might be worth thinking about. And I have an example of this, but I don't know if it's really worth it. Let me show you what happened here. Let me show you what black wants. I do have something about that. If white plays e4, standard move, and black plays here and white plays here, then we've got just enough time to play our bishop here move. I mentioned this earlier. And this kind of position I think is playable for black. It may not be perfect, but it's certainly playable. I just give a sample here of some moves. Rook here, I think I have knight d2. Yeah, knight d2 is sort of a standard Bononi idea to get knight c4 in at some point. So a6, a4, stopping b5, knight d7, and I say this is about equal. I feel it's very similar to what we just looked at, although white's pieces are coordinating better than in the last example. I think this is a pretty good example of how both sides might play this. Okay, so the game, continue with the game. Oh, knight f3, sorry, wasn't there a mate on g7? Oh my god. In my example, I don't think so. Oh, you're talking about another game. Whoa, look at all this. Whoa, a lot of comments. Let me finish this, see if I can get through this fairly quickly. Okay, this time black allows h5 in order to put the knight in the center, but I just wanted to show you how slow that is. Space. This is a good example of how space in and of itself. For example, if black plays slowly here, this is just too strong. Playing here, playing here. Now it's not just that e5 is a threat, but even h6, weakening all those dark squares, and eventually f5 could be played. I'm trying to think what a good example here might be. Anyway, you could kind of get the idea here. The idea is that white's going to blast through here. Let's say black plays rook e8 or something, and maybe just white could play for f5 here and just attack that way. Or e5. e5 is a big move too. So black really doesn't want to allow that, but in order to stop that, he tried a counterattacking idea of f5, and that loosens the position a lot. So white gets, now here's a good example of where white's behind in development, but gets space, just goes for space. Look at this, he's only got 2 pieces out, but look how passive black's pieces are. They're restricted, so white makes yet another pawn move to stop bishop f6. And now you might wonder, well, where's that knight going? Where's that bishop going? Where's this bishop going? And so space and cramping pawns can make up for a lack of development. So just to continue the game, now white starts getting his pieces out. And black does a smart thing, going kingside would be suicide against these pawns. The problem is that the queenside's also dangerous because of this move b4. Castling queenside in chess generally can be dangerous. That's probably not the most accurate move, by the way. but we'll let him play it anyway. The idea is get the king out of the way and just play for b4, and it does work. Black had better than what he did, but not that good anyway. White's got what he wants here. b4 is a huge threat now. That's the problem. And in fact, he's ready. He could have played it last move. Would have been pretty much winning, actually. Just to show you that. Something like this is just too strong, I think. Yeah, taking, then just bring the rook over. And the king has to move, and then just start taking things like this. I think would, oh wait, that wins the queen. So anyway, I think you're getting the idea here. It's really overwhelming. And it's kind of overwhelming anyway, even though black retreats the queen, that's still a great move. In fact, black gives up material now because he can't figure out what to do. If the king comes over, you're just going to, off that file, you're just going to take this, just blast away. Everything's falling apart here. d6. I don't know where the queen goes. Maybe here. And then you've got maybe a move like check. Maybe knight up, threatening check, and threatening rook takes, and bishop takes, and everything else in the world. Okay? So the game was over very quickly. What black gave up the queen for a pawn and a bishop, gave up a pawn and a queen for a bishop and a rook, and is still being attacked. So this was over very quickly. Okay, so let's get back to the chat here. Okay, but I just want to show you, those are the Knight E7 lines that Jonathan wanted to be shown. You could play it as black. I like that bishop E7, F6 first, and then Knight E7 as an idea, just to fool people. There's almost no games in the database with any of this stuff, by the way. What's the next thing? Can you show some lines for black in the Caro-Kann advance that avoid mainline theory? Ooh, that's tough. Maybe that's one of those next week games. There's a whole bunch of them, but I don't know if any of them are any good is the problem. Let me see what the next game is I'm going to bring. Or no, I should answer some questions that people, to get back to things that people either commented on or sent me things to ask about. There's a Choran overview that people ask me about, and there's this Scandi Gambit stuff. Yeah, let's do that first. Let's do the Scandi Gambit. So I'm going back to last week a little bit, just because I keep promising that I'm going to show things the next week, and then I don't always do that. So let me just put up a board here, just a random board. In the Scandinavian, there was this question about how to recapture, whether to play e6 or c6, and I said I like c6. I looked up a bunch of c6 games. Looks like black's just doing perfectly okay here, because he plays e5 and he stops this forever. And the main line is like this, to stop e4 also. That's what would happen on knight c3 maybe. And then black usually plays bishop c5, but I notice this move's good too. Just getting ready to play like this and put a rook on d8 and take that pawn. Or just keep attacking. And this is played a lot too. And these lines are doing very well for black. So just for the record, you can always play c6. The question was specifically about this, though. We got into a discussion of this position. Now I think knight f3 is best here, although d4 might be okay, but it's risky. And the thing I didn't catch was someone made a comment here about playing with queen e7 at this point, given by Smurden, instead of bishop b4. Bishop b4 is the main move. We can talk about that. By the way, let me mention something about bishop b4. Everybody plays here, and now I think that this is a very good move, underestimated move. A lot of times people play queen e7 here, which I'm not so sure about. I think black is still maybe struggling for full compensation here, in my opinion. But I notice this move is very hard to meet. It really is. It's just a bother. I mean, if you can't play the queen up here anymore because you can take this, right? And you can't play the knight here because he takes this one. In the meantime, c3 is attacked. This move fails to queen takes. Whoops, queen takes d4. Let me see. So anyway, let me see if there's any extra things to talk about there. Actually, queen c2, I was kind of wrong. I think the way to play against queen c2 is actually kind of clever. It's to play this way, threatening bishop takes c3 check. This can't be taken, and this can't be taken because of the rook, and this one can't be taken because the king's hanging. And if white plays there, still threatening both moves, then black can just move back. and you still can't take this bishop because of this. Anyway, that's what I recommend for black against knight c3, and it's not played that often, but it has been played and it's done very well. What I don't understand is why nobody plays here. One game went like this, but it's just unsound because you don't win your material back. So what exactly is black's idea? Probably queen e7, I think, is the move. And then there's a bunch of ways for white to play this. I'm not so convinced this is so bad. I think that's an interesting move, bishop e2. Probably people haven't played that because of this. But then you have, I think queen a4 check is a good move here, threatening the bishop twice. So knight c6 has to be played. And then we take it, and now queen takes is forced. And whoops, he just lost a piece. And when he tries to get back the rook, we've all seen positions like this, the knight can't get out. So you're going to get 2 knights for a rook, plus a really, really good position. So it's just too much. This is almost winning for white. So I think bishop e2 is an interesting move here against queen e7. And what else can black do here? He can play probably, I'm trying to think what the best move is here. Yeah, I can't find, there's other ways to play it for white too. White can actually take this too. It's not bad for white to take this here and go here. And then the best move for black is to come back again. It's as if he had taken here, by the way. Then white can block the discovered check, still be a pawn ahead, and if black gets ambitious, just go over here and there's no discovered checks because of taking the queen. And black has a little bit of compensation maybe, but not much. So I'm very skeptical of the whole line. Just thought I'd mention that. And after queen e7, which is the line we've been talking about, how does this go? Here, here, queen e7, Smerdon's line. I just want to play bishop e3 and just block off the discovered attacks. I think white's just better here. Most people have played this in this position. There have been a bunch of games, but overall white's done pretty well. I like the idea now of just developing and then bringing the knight out and castling kingside because you can't really effectively attack that. And white's better developed, and I just like this position. The computer thinks it's plus over minus. I think I agree. But you can also just play a simple move like that, just defend that. The whole thing, knight g4 is the only move that's worked for black at all, but I don't think it should really. There was a game with this that won for white also, protecting this and attacking that. White's maybe thinking about castling queenside. I don't know. d5 is always a move. So I don't believe Smerdon's recommendation is that good. And I also think maybe c6 is a better move, but that's all just for the record. What else do we have here? What do you think of the Benko opening g3? That's a very general question. Obviously, it's fine. White can play anything. We've talked about that before. Besides g4 and h4, probably everything's sound. Especially h4. Don't like h4 at all. So you can always play that. It's a logical move. Black plays a tempo down, so it can't be that bad. One of the things to remember about a move like this is black doesn't have to sort of collaborate and play all these queen pawn opening moves, moves like that. I mean, black he doesn't have to go into a King's Indian or a Grunfeld reversed, for example, or he doesn't have to play into a Bononi reversed or something like that. I don't know, something like whose move is it? Oh, white's move. He doesn't even have to play that. He doesn't have to play the move c5. So that's one thing about g3. It's awfully simple to play very solidly against it. Black often will play simple things like this and then maybe even e5 or e6. Knight f6 is usually played next. Bishop g4, bishop f5, e3. That's a very solid system against 1g3. Black can also, as it turns out, play g6 in a position like this. A lot of the top players are playing this way these days. They're copying black, but they're also playing d5. So those are things that black's doing. g3 is perfectly good. It's very flexible. You can play all kinds of plans with it. You can play a3 and b4. You can play c4. You can play b3. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. Could be a lot of fun. Definitely test your chess skills. But I also think it's not, the reason you don't see it more often is that it's too easy to play against in a way. It's too easy to equalize against. So he beat King Crusher. That's always nice. And you guys are exchanging information, which is cool. I love it when you guys chat. Wales and New Zealand. I don't know about this mate on g7. This may be something I did wrong. I'm not sure. Okay. Okay. Yeah, after king g6 attacking the rook on f5 in the last game, the knight was hanging and the rook was hanging, so it was just a win. In fact, he resigned at that point, I think. So that's actually a winning position. There wasn't anything wrong with that position. Okay, so what do we got going on here? Oh, so that's that Scandi gambit question. I'm trying to run through some of these things. Where's that Choran question? I've also got Steinar's game. How's our time doing? Probably not time enough to do a really good game. Let me answer another thing that I was asked last weekend. I said I would get to. I won't get to the whole thing, but I want to throw you a Choran outline, Choran defense outline. This is the Choran defense to the Queen's Gambit. Oh, well, let me go up the chat and see if I missed anything really obvious. Okay. Great comments. I love that St. George. That was cool. Chess philosopher. Yeah, I had a kid play that against me, and I was very impressed. He was a really strong kid. Just analyzed really rapidly, quickly, knowledgeably. It was intimidating. Okay, so here's the Queen's Gambit, and here's the Choran defense of the Queen's Gambit. And at least I hope this is what was asked. I think it was. It wasn't the Roy Lopez Choran defense, I don't think. I think it was the regular Choran defense. Now you can look at, if you're an ICC member, I think I mentioned this last week, I have a lecture series on the Choran. It's about, I don't know, 6 or 7 videos, and it's for free. It's in the archives, easy to get to, and you can look at what I say in detail about all these lines. I give a full repertoire. The overview is something like, okay, what's Black planning to do? Well, Black wouldn't mind just taking that and then playing knight takes. He also wouldn't mind playing maybe e5 here. So White can't just play too slowly because Black has things to do. So what are the moves? The moves are probably e3 is one move, just defending the center and defending the c pawn. C takes d, trying to break up the center and get a central majority, and that's extremely critical. Knight c3, just putting more pressure on the center, and knight f3, protecting this pawn and stopping e5, which are Black's big goals here. So let me go in order, or not in order, but in some sort of order. E3 is a very dangerous move, actually. It's much better than it looks, because if Black plays slowly, White will just get the center. He'll have sort of a standard Queen's Gambit where that knight really maybe isn't sitting there very well because it can't attack the center again. So Black's most ambitious move and best move is this, but it involves sacrificing a pawn. Now if White plays pawn takes, queen takes, this goes back to a line that I'll mention later, and White attacks the center and Black pins, and that's a known line that comes from earlier, from playing c takes d5 on the move before. So the main independent move is this move, attacking this pawn twice, and Black plays here, and this can actually transpose into the Albin counter gambit, which is the idea here is that you're a pawn down, but this one's hanging in a lot of variations, and things are really cramped, and if White tries to play a very natural move like that, he runs into check. And there's no easy way to answer that without getting these pawns isolated on an open file. For example, something like this. And if White plays the more natural move, bishop d2, this works even better because White doesn't have time to play bishop takes because of check. And then he'll get the piece back, but he'll also have that extra pawn. And so White has to take back, but this kind of position is very nice for Black because he just puts a rook on the open file and he probably wins both these pawns, or at least wins one of them back with material equality, but also has pressure on the remaining pawn. So that's why knight f3 is considered a mistake. So often White will play this move, and there are books that recommend playing this way. And Black has a whole bunch of replies, but I think the easiest one is just to play here. And then if White usually doesn't want to take because then this pawn's going to fall anyway pretty soon, and there's just too much hanging. For example, if this, all of a sudden Black has threats all over the place and doesn't just stand equally, stands better. Also, the pieces are coming out really easily. Rook on an open file. This is pretty much winning for Black. So what White does in positions like this is play something like b4 or knight f3. If he plays knight f3, he runs into this bishop g4 move. Very easy to play for Black. He's going to get that pawn back. If he plays b4, my memory's terrible. Knight f5, I think, would be a good move here. Famous last words, right? Then if b5, you can just take this pawn. If he goes here, you've got that same problem where Black's just way too far ahead in development. And so White would probably play here And what happens is at some point black simply takes this. Let me see if I can get this. Maybe there's a more accurate move order. I think this is a more accurate move order, because if b5 takes, it looks like white's winning a pawn, but black gets back this pawn with a huge lead in development. So b5 is not a good move, but if white simply defends that and attacks the center, I think black now can simply take this. And that position's actually pretty good. You're threatening queen takes queen, so probably white plays queen takes queen. White's still a pawn ahead, but I think that at this point, things are kind of going wrong for white because that's such a nice move to make, I think. Good question. Good question. I'm not absolutely sure about this. How about, I'm almost sure this is a position that's considered good. Oh, I'm sorry, knight here. Let's just win this pawn back. There's no way to defend it. There's no easy way to defend it. Good, and once you win your pawn back, you're ahead in development. Sorry, so black's actually better here. So this whole idea, which is very recommended in a lot of books, I don't think is that good after knight here. I think black's just fine here. I mean, it's only equal if white plays well, but black's always at least equal. So that's e3. e3 is answered by e5, and you may think how trivial. You don't even see e3 that much, but it's good to know why, isn't it, if you're going to play black. Okay, another very simple move is to take that. Now you have to defend this. It turns out, and maybe I won't try to prove this, but it turns out knight f3 is actually not the best move because e5 is a very strong gambit reply. You can just imagine that if he takes that, you've got these problems with the king in the center. You can just imagine that this kind of thing is castling queenside with check. Bishop can come to c5 with tempo on that. This pawn is pretty weak too. It can be attacked. Knight e7, g6. It's on an open file. So you just have to take my word for that one. If you don't take it, there's problems too. So what white always does is the move e3, much better move. Because now when black tries to attack the center, which is probably the best move, white has a chance to fortify the center by attacking the queen first, and if the queen doesn't want to lose time, you have to pin it, and then you unpin it, attacking the queen again, forcing black to take, and boom, now you've managed to protect your center. On the other hand, you have a passive bishop, and you're way behind in development, because as black's moving, he's going to get another piece out. Now, here there's a whole bunch of moves, so I won't go into it in detail, but the idea is that it's two bishops for white versus more space for black and better development. And there's different ways to play this. I mean, I think I won't go further than that. I'm just giving you an outline here. And in my lecture series, I talk about that position a lot. Okay, so the two main moves that white will usually play, because those moves aren't considered that good, are knight f3 and knight c3. And, oh, I didn't show you one. I'm sorry. I missed a very important one, which is that after this, attacking here, what happened is the modern players, because this wasn't working that well, all started playing bishop takes. And for a while, this was what all the top grandmasters were playing whenever they did meet the Chogorans. And the idea is that you can take that, and now if white had to retake, that would be isolated and weak. But instead, white was playing here and retaking with a piece. And the main line for a long time was playing here, knight takes, castles, knight b5, threatening to get the queens off with a two-bishop ending, and knight takes c7 and bishop takes f6. And black would sacrifice the c-pawn with queen g5 and was actually getting pretty good play. A simpler way for black to play is to play this way. And I feel like this is completely equal. Something like this can happen. Maybe I'll have to finish this next week. Something like this can happen. And then I think the best move is probably just f6, because then your king can stay in the center rather than castling. And then you're just going to play knight f5 or knight f5 and attack that bishop. And why is it that white isn't just better with the bishops here is the question. Oh, I know why. Let's just see here. Let's try a sample line. What's a good sample line? Okay, maybe bishop here. And what can happen is after this goes back, black is always able to just exchange these bishops. In fact, probably here first, and then just come up and play here. And so instead of two bishops versus a knight and a bishop, you're going to have a bishop versus knight in a position where black has a very nice pawn structure. And okay, obviously white can't be worse, but on the other hand, it's very easy for black to play. So this line is not, I don't think, that convincing for white. This is the safe way to play it. The other way that I showed you with the knight f6, queen g5 was the risky way to play it. And you can go over all this on YouTube afterwards. Remember, all these shows are archived. And you can make comments below the show too. I haven't been checking those recently, but I should. Okay, so that leaves knight c3 and knight f3. And maybe next week that's where I should leave it. is that because these are complicated, both these moves are very complicated, and we're already quite a ways past time on the time. So let me take one last look at the chat and see what you guys are saying. Knight f3, 1 a rook. Knight can move to attack the black rook. Yeah, I'll check that, Alan. Don't think it's true, but if it is true, then black was winning for other reasons before that anyway. Can you show the well-known trap in the Cambridge Springs? Oh my golly, it's been ages. I hope I don't mess it up. Oh well, one trap. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if this is the one you mean. The Cambridge Springs usually starts with that move, followed by that move, followed by Queen A5. So the most famous trap in the Queen's Gambit, now this isn't the Cambridge Springs yet, but it is the Cambridge Springs move order, is for white to grab that pawn. And that's a blunder because after knight takes, giving up the queen, you've already won a piece and you get the queen back because the king has nowhere to go. So you have to play queen there, and then black can just take back or take the queen. And now he's a piece up, really for nothing. So it's a cute little trap, and there's no way out once you play knight takes d5. So that's why white always plays this in this position, which by the way threatens knight d5, which is why you'll usually see that move. Although bishop e7 can also be played because if you take, you can just take back now. But c6 is more flexible. Now let me show you the Cambridge Springs itself, because you may be talking about something else here. The Cambridge Springs itself goes like this, queen a5. I'm trying to think what kind of traps there are here. There's some funny traps where the queen comes and takes the bishop. There's like a knight e4 followed by taking the bishop. The problem is I play the white side of this and I don't fall for anything, so I'm not sure what I'm supposed to fall for. I think the idea is that knight e4 can be a very strong move. Now let's say white played slowly. I think that might be almost a blunder because this move attacks here and has also the idea of d takes c4 in some lines and knight takes g5. I don't know if it's a blunder, but I think it's probably a pretty good line for, I mean, what we would do is play a gambit, sort of a gambit-y kind of move. And maybe black wouldn't be that well off. Maybe it's just equal or something. But that's maybe a trap. There is a trap of taking there. Do you remember actually, Jonathan, or did you mean the one I mentioned? The Lasker trap on against the Alban. Yeah, actually, Steiner, that's more like yeah. In fact, there's a really radical version of this trick in the Alban, which is actually much better. Well, it just wins for black, and that's like this. Here's the Alban gambit. The Alban counter gambit is this move, and then this move. And if white attacks it, then black plays this move. And okay, here's the one. What's the one I'm thinking of where you actually take and take again here? What am I missing? Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe this is it right away. Playing is yeah. Maybe it's bishop b4 check right away. That's another way to play it. In the Alban gambit, you have that move right away. And then if bishop here, it's actually more fun in a way because after this move, you have this check. And if white takes the pawn, you win a whole queen. But if white plays king up, you play pawn takes and you get a knight with check. See that knight check? And now white has to take it, obviously. And then you have bishop g4 check. So that's the cute Alban counter gambit. Well, that's the one you probably mean. That's the really nice one. Nice version of it because of the knight promotion, which is, of course, an unusual thing in chess to see a knight promotion, especially this early in the game. So what white would do, of course, is just take back. But then what happens is what we've discussed before. There are two weak pawns on an open file. And you'll pick up this one very quickly. Black also has, I think, the chance to put a queen on e4 if in a position like this, which is pretty difficult for white. Because the simpler the position gets, the easier it is for black because of all of white's weak pawns. Something like this is pretty easy for black to play because he has pressure straight down the file on a weak pawn. And this bishop isn't even very good because it's running into its own pawn. And this bishop's very nice. So, and black has no weaknesses at all. So this is an advantage for black, a small one. He is attacking this pawn too, so he gained a tempo also. Okay, yeah, that's a beautiful little trap. I love it with the knight. Okay, what do we have here? What do you think of g3 and the queen a5 Scandinavian? Might be a little slow, but I think it's playable. He's talking about playing like, oh, by the way, I think in a couple earlier lessons, if you guys are interested, I showed this line that's in my repertoire. For ICC, I have an E4 repertoire and a D4 repertoire in the archives. In the E4 repertoire, I recommend playing this move first, and I don't play this Knight C3 move too quickly. And one of the reasons is because I want to get the moves. There's quite a few lines where I want to get the moves D4 and C4 in and expand in the center. Because a lot of the Knight C3 lines, what happens is you get D4 in, but you can't really push it, and it becomes a little bit of a target on the file because it doesn't have, there's no oomph, there's no advance in the center. So the idea of Knight F3, which is a common, grandmasters have played it a fair amount, but it's a good way to play. It's also very solid and safe. Okay, the question is, what about G3? I think here at this point, with the idea of playing H3 Knight Ge2, you might not even need H3. Or Rook B1, Knight F3, B4, B5. Okay, so let's just say black makes natural move. Now, one thing about playing slowly with a move like G3 is you do have this E5 move. And so you always have to watch out. Once black gets E5, he's got a little more control of the center. Now, I don't even know if that's the best move, but it's something to think about. The idea of H3, I think, was probably to stop that from being an effective move. But, you know, white can just develop here. But I think the idea would be, yeah, to play this early on and stop that move for black. But then again, E5 is a bit of a problem, followed by here. I think giving black that much center is probably the reason you don't see it very often. On the other hand, it can't be a bad move. There's no way this can be a bad move. It reminds me of the center counter or something like that, which is, you know, fine opening for that black can play G6 in the center counter against Queen A4. So yeah, this has got to be at least equal. You know what I might do? I might do this move first, so that if the bishop comes out, I can play H3. And if black plays a normal move like that, now I'll go back to that. I'm still wondering about E5. Just castles, I guess. Sure, this is definitely playable. And then you mentioned the idea of playing Rook B1, B4, B5. I don't know if it's realistic. Depends on the position, obviously. Could work, but it depends on the position. Something else I think we talked about in this show is this very cute move, B4. This is a great move. You should play this in Blitz if nothing else. And I think it might be a much better move. It's called the Mises Gambit. Mises played it with the idea of playing Rook B1 and getting pieces out real quickly. And I think it's just fairly useless because black has no weaknesses. I mean, white can get a little bit of an attack maybe, but it's not enough for a pawn. And that's why no one ever plays this. But there's a really cute way to play this. It's to play a move that isn't a developing move there. And now what black finds is he can never really get castled. He can't get this bishop out and get castled easily. For example, a move like there runs into bishop a3 followed by bishop takes and the king's stuck in the center. And that's more important than being a little ahead in development. And you still have good development here, right? You still have very good development, right? The queen's still out, maybe subject to attack, and you've got a bunch of pieces out. So this position, I think you have full compensation for a pawn. So this a4 move is really ridiculous, right? But it's actually pretty cool. Because what does black do exactly about it? It's almost impossible to stop this move. And Rook B1 is still a possibility in some lines too. So, you know, that's kind of nice to have in you know, holding on to the line. Now, probably a grandmaster would tell you that with perfect play, black's still a pawn up, and even though there's compensation, it may not be enough. But I think this is well worth trying. And there's some pretty games. We have this in, where do we have this? I have this somewhere, maybe Taming the Wild Chess Openings or something like that. I have this analyzed some, and there's always ways for white to get some kind of attack. The pieces come out very smoothly. It's like a normal e-pawn opening. You know, knight f3, bishop c4, castles, rook e1, d4, d5, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the nice thing is that you've stopped black from castling. Now you might say, why did he play a stupid move like e6? Well, the problem is he's still got to get castled. And if he moves this, you've got the same problem. Bishop takes f8. If he tries to go queenside, he's going queenside into an open file. That's never going to work, or it's very seldom going to work. So that's the idea. So you might have some fun with b4. Of course, black also maybe can decline it, I guess. You know, just make another move like queen here or something. But then, you know, then you got some space on the queen side. I think you could have some fun with this. Ivanov has been arrested. Which Ivanov? There's like 100 of them. Borislav. Oh, well, he's the guy that cheated? Forging documents. Sad that everyone plays A3 though. A3 in which line? Yeah, I'm not sure which one that is. I always go over time. Well, thanks, Steiner. Yeah, there you go. More value. My brain is numb now. My brain's numb too, so it's probably a good time to stop. Thank you, everybody. It was fun. I'm trying to do the right balance between all the stuff you send me and the chat. And it's working pretty well, I think. I don't want to ignore the chat because I think everybody has fun with that. But please send me things. Ask I am Watson at chessclub.com, AskIamWatson at chessclub.com. And or send me, you can message me on John L. Watson on ICC, JOHNLWATSON. And what else? What else to mention? Nothing, I guess. So thanks, everybody, and keep coming on. Tell your friends about it. Come up with questions, either for the chat or in advance, and we'll have a lot of fun with this stuff. Thank you.